Halo, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from group 6. We would like to present regarding to English literature with me, Naufal Farras Arfianda, and my friends, Naufal Arik Mustafa, Muhammad Khayan, Abyan Nauval, Abdul Aziz, and Farid Abdullah Mufid. Next. We would like to present about English literature. So, English literature is the body of written works that produced in the English language by inhabitants of British Isles, including Ireland from 7th century to the present day. The major literatures written in English outside the British Isles are treated sparingly under American literature, Australian literature, Canadian, and New Zealand literature. Next. Okay, so we will start from the Old English period, and we like to present by my friend.
Okay, so I would like to present uh, the Old English period. Next. So the first is poetry. The Angles, Saxons, and Jutes who invaded Britain in the 5th and 6th centuries brought with them the common Germanic matter. But of their earliest oral poetry, probably used for panegyric, magic, and short narrative, little or none survives. For nearly a century after the conversion of King Ethelbert I of Kent to Christianity about 600, there is no evidence that the English wrote poetry in their own language. But Saint Bede the Venerable in his Historia Ecclesiastica Gentis Anglorum wrote that in the late 7th century Sedmon, in illiterate Northumbrian Coward was inspired in a dream to compose a short hymn in praise of the creation. Caedmon later composed verses based on scripture, which was expounded for him by monks out at Streanachal, but only the hymn of creation survives. Caedmon legitimized the native verse form by adapting it to Christian themes. Others, following his example, gave England a body of vernacular poetry unparalleled in Europe before the end of the first millennium. Next. The next is alliterative verse. Virtually, all Old English poetry is written in a single meter, a four-stressed line with a synthetical break or caesura between the second and third stresses, and with alliteration linking to the two halves of the line. This pattern is occasionally varied by six-stressed line. The poetry is formulaic, drawing on a common set of stop phrases and phrase patterns, applying standard epithets to various classes of characters, and depicting scenery with such recurring images as the eagles and the wolf, which wait during battles to feast on carrion, and ice and snow, which appears in the landscape to signal sorrow. In the best poems, such formulas, far from being tedious, give a strong impression of the richness of the cultural fund from which poets could draw. Other standard devices of this poetry are canning, a figurative name for a thing, usually expressed in a compound noun, and variation, the repeating of a single idea in different words, with each repetition adding a new level of meaning. That these verse techniques changed little during 400 years of literary production suggests the theme conservatism of Anglo-Saxon culture. Next. The next is major manuscripts. Most Old English poetry is preserved in four manuscripts of the late 10th and the early 11th centuries. The Beowulf manuscript contains Beowulf, Judith, and three prose tracts. The Exeter Books is a miscellaneous gathering of lyrics, riddles, and didactic poems and religious narratives. The Tunis manuscripts, also called the Cadmon manuscript, even though its content are no longer attributed to Cadmon, contains biblical paraphrases. And the Firstly book contains saint lives, several short religious poems, and four homilies. In addition to the poems, in these books are historical poems in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, poetic renderings of Psalms 51 until 150, the 31 matters included in King Alfred the Great's translation of Boethius, the Consolatione Philosophiae, magical, didactic, elegiac, and heroic poems, and others. Miscellaneously intercepted with prose, jotted in margins, and even worked in stone or metal. Next. The next is problems of dating. The dating of Old English poems is challenging due to the lack of specific information. While some poems can be dated closely, such as Cadmon's hymn and Bede's Death Song, many others are difficult to date. The scholarly consensus that most poems were composed in the Midlands and North between the 8th and 9th centuries has been replaced by uncertainty. Many now believe that poems like The Wanderer and Beowulf were written in the 9th century or later. And for most poems, there is no consensus beyond the range of the 8th to 11th centuries. Next slide, please. The next is religious verse. If few poems can be dated accurately, still fewer can be attributed to particular poets. The most important author from whom a considerable body of work survives is Cynewulf, who wove his runic signature into the epilogue of four poems. Aside from his name, little is known of him. He probably lived in the 9th century in Mercia or Northumbria. His work includes the Fates of the Apostles, a short martyrology, Ancients, a homily and biblical narrative, Juliana, a saint's passion set in the reign of the Roman Emperor Maximian, and Alien, perhaps the best of his poem, which described the mission of Saint Helena, the mother of the Emperor Constantine, to recover Christ's cross. Cynewulf's work is lucid and technically elegant. His theme is the continuing evangelical mission from the time of Christ to the time of Christianity under Constantine. Several poems not by Cynewulf are associated with him because of his subject matter. This includes two lives of Saint Goodluck and Andreas, the latter the apocryphal story of how Saint Andrew fell into the hands of the cannibalistic Myrmidonians, has stylistic affinities with Beowulf. Also, in the Cynewulf group are several poems with Christ as their subject, of which the most important is The Dream of the Road, in which the cross speaks of itself as Christ's royal thank and yet the instrument of his death. This tragic paradox echoes a recurring theme of secular poetry and at the same time, movingly expresses the religious paradoxes of Christ's triumph in death and humankind's redemption from sin. Several poems of the Jewish manuscripts are based on the Old Testament narrative Genesis, Exodus, and Daniel. Of this, Exodus is remarkable of its intricate diction and bold imagery. The fragmentary Judith of the Beowulf manuscript stirringly embellishes the story from the Apocrypha of the heroine who led the Jews to victory over the Assyrians. Next. The next is elegiac and heroic verse. Old English poetry encompasses elegiac and heroic verse. Elegies like The Wanderer and the Seafarer lament loss, be it of companionship or glory, highlighting spiritual yearnings and existential realization. Poems such as Bridge Elegy, and Heroism, mourning loss through Germanic legend. In contrast, heroic narratives like Beowulf depict battles against monsters, blending Christian themes with tales of temporary victory and eternal strife. Fragmentary works like the Battle of Finnsburg and Walder evoke past-paced heroism. Historical poems like the Battle of Brunanburh and the Battle of Malden celebrate English victories and heroic ideals amidst defeat, while minor genres includes catalogs, dialogues, and liturgical poems from the Alfredian period. Next. The next is prose. The earliest English prose work, the Law Code of King Ethelbert I of Kent, was written within a few years of the arrival in England, 597, of Saint Augustine of Canterbury. Other 7th and 8th century prose, similarly practical in character, include small laws, wills, and charters. According to Cuthbert, who was a monk at General Pitt at the time of his death, had just finished a translation of the Gospel of St. John. Though this does not survive. Two medical tracts, Herbarium and Medicina, the Quadrupedibus, very likely date from the 8th century. Next. And then the Alfredian translation. The first is King Alfred's program. The purpose of this program is to improve learning by translating essential books into English. Alfred translated works such as St. Gregory's Pastoral Care, Boethius' Consolation of Philosophy, St. Augustine's Soliloquies, and the first 50 Psalms. The influence of this program is inspired translation of Bede's Historia Ecclesiastica, Gregory's Dialogues, and Orosius' Historiarium Adversus Paganus Libri V. Next. The second is late 10th and 11th century prose. The purpose of this program is to impose order and discipline of monastic life. The example of this is Ethelwerd, which is translated the rule of Saint Benedict, and then Alfred, which is prolific writer of homilies, saint lives, and other religious texts, known for clear and elegant prose. And then there's Wulfstan, an Archbishop of York, wrote legal codes and homilies, including the famous Sermolupi et Anglos. Next. The next is the early Middle English period. Next. The first one is poetry. The Norman conquest didn't immediately transform English language or literature. Old English poetry continued being copied in the late 11th century. Early 12th century poems like Durham and Instruction for Christians show correct alliterative verse post 1066. Rhyme began to replace alliteration before the conquest, as seen in the grave and a rhyming poem about William the Conqueror's death in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. Next. The next is influence of French poetry. By the late of 12th century, French influence was strong in English poetry. Lawamon's Brut mixed alliterative lines with rhyming couplets, going from Wace's Roman de Brut and Geoffrey of Monmouth Historia Regum Britanniae. The proverbs of Alfred and the early 13th century bestiary mix alliterative lines with varied matters. The anonymous Poema Morale delivers moral advice. The Owl and the Nightingale, a learned yet a colloquial debate poem, showcases French matter confidently. Next. The next is didactic poetry. The 13th century saw a rise in the popularity of long didactic poems presenting biblical narratives, sense lives, or moral instruction for those untutored in Latin or French. The most idiosyncratic of this is the Ormulum by Orm, an Augustinian canon in the north of England, written in some to 2000 to 20,000 lines, in that the manuscript that preserves it is Orm's autograph and shows his somewhat fussy efforts to reform and regularize English spelling. Other biblical paraphrases are Genesis and Exodus, Jacob and Joseph, and the vast cursor mundi, whose subject, as its title suggests, is the history of the world. An especially popular work was the South English Legendary, which began as a miscellaneous collection of sense lives but was expanded by later redactors and rearranged in the church calendar. The didactic tradition continued into the 14th century with the Robert Manning's Handling Sin, a conventional manual whose expected dryness is relieved by the insertion of lively narratives, and the Prick of Conscience, a popular summary of theology sometimes attributed to the mystic Richard Rolle. Next. The next is verse romance. Verse romances, genre from the 13th century onward, include early example like Kinghorn and Floris and the Blanchefleur, both found in a manuscript from around 1250. Kinghorn tells of a kingdom reclaimed, intertwined with Horde's love for Princess Rimenilde, while Floris and Blanchefleur narrates the adventures of royal lovers who reunite after trials in distant lands. Another notable work, The Lay of Havelock the Dane, similar to Kinghorn but more refined, emerged soon after. These romances catered to a bourgeois audience and were often part of the Arthurian or Trojan themes, or featured magical elements influenced by Breton lanes. The period also saw the introduction of humorous works like The Fox and the Wolf and The Land of Khagan, depicting fantastical utopias and everyday satire. Next. The next is the lyrics. During the Old English period, lyrical poetry was uncommon. Poems like Dior and Wolf and Idweser, often labeled as lyrics, differed thematically from later medieval works, being more narrative-driven. Middle English secular lyrics, prevalent from the 12th and 13th centuries, focused heavily on themes of spring and romantic love. Examples like Paulus in the Frith and Each Arm of Ireland captured intense emotions concisely. Many of these poems were likely sung, with notable early examples like Merry it is while summer lasts, and Summer is Ichuman in, having surviving musical settings. Religious lyrics of the period express passionate devotion, borrowing language from love poetry to convey sorrow for Christ and veneration Mary for Mary. Manuscript anthologies, notably British Library manuscript Harley 22 and 53, preserves many of these works, showcasing both love poems and religious verses. Despite growing influence from Anglo-Norman literature, Middle English poetry, whether depicting kings or peasants, often offered a lively, gorgeous perspective on daily life. Next. The next is Old English prose. Uh, Old English prose continued to be copied well into the post-conquest period. Uh, some popular works of Old English prose is Homilies of Alfred and King Alfred's translation, which survived mainly in 12th century manuscripts. And then there is Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. A strong, a strong prose continued for years to post-conquest, with the Peterborough Chronicle extending to 1154. Next. And then two manuscripts of about 100 and 1200 contain 12th century sermons, and another has the workmanlike compilation Vices and Virtues, composed about 1200. But the English language faced stiff competition from both Anglo-Norman and Latin, language intelligible to speakers of both English and French. It was inevitable then that the production of English prose should decline in quantity, if not in quality. The great prose works of this period were composed mainly for those who could read only English women especially. In the West Midlands, or the Old English alliterative prose tradition remained very much alive into the 13th century, when the several texts known collectively as the Catherine's group were written. Saint Catherine, Saint Margaret, and Saint Juliana, found together in a single manuscript, have written strongly reminiscent of those of Helfrich and Wolfstan. So, to a lesser extent to Hali Metcalf and Solus Warde from the same book, but newer influences can be seen in these works, as well as the title of another devotional piece, the Wohung of Ure Lord, suggests the prose of this time often has a rapturous, even sensual flavor, like the poetry. It frequently employs the language of love to express religious fervor. Next. Uh, Further removed from the Old English prose tradition, though often associated with the Catherine group, is the Angkrin Wis. a manual for the guidance of women recluses outside the regular orders. This anonymous works, which was translated into French and Latin and remained popular until the 16th century, is notable for its humanity, practicality, and insight into human nature, but even more for its brilliant style. Like the other prose of its time, it uses alliteration as ornament, but it is more indebted to new fashions in preaching, which had originated in the universities, than to native traditions, which, with its richly figurative language, rhetoric, rhetoric, rhetorically crafted sentences, and carefully logical divisions and subdivisions, it manages to achieve in English the effects that such contemporary writers as John of Salisbury and Walter Map were striving for in Latin. Little noteworthy prose was written in the 13th century. In the early 14th century, Dan Michel of Northgate produced in Kentish the Iron Bit of Inuit, a translation from French. But the best prose of this time is by the mystic Richard Rolle, the Hermit of Hampole, whose English tracts include the Commandment, Meditation of the Passion, and the Form of Perfect Living, among others. His intense and stylized prose was among the most popular of the 14th century and inspired such later works as Walter Hilton's Scale of Perfection, Julian of Norwich, 16 Revelation of Divine Love, and the Anonymous Cloud of Unknowing. Next. Okay, the next material will be presented by my friends Muhammad Khayan.
Okay, next one is I would like to present the material about the later Middle English and early Renaissance periods. Between 1350 and 1550, English literature developed amidst a complex linguistic environment. During this period, bilingualism and trilingualism were common among the literate minority in England. English had to compete with Latin and Anglo-Norman French, which were considered more prestigious literary language. Additionally, the diversity of English dialects hindered the widespread circulation of vernacular writings, unlike Latin and Anglo-Norman, which could reach broader audience. Despite this challenge, and in the face of significant societal upheaval, like the Black Death, the Hundred Years' Wars, the Wars of the Rose, the Peasants' Revolt, and the rise of Lollardism, English literature not only survived but thrived. This period witnessed a remarkable literary and linguistic transformation that began around 1350, gaining momentum over the next 150 years. The revival of alliterative poetry. In the mid-14th century, the alliterative poetry movement in England resurged, resulting in works like William of Palern and Winner and Webster. These poets, often influenced by Latin source, created vivid descriptions of scenes and drew on Latin source. The alliterative movement flourished in northern and northwestern England, filling a literary gap left by the decline of Anglo-Norman. William Langland's Piers Plowman adapted the alliterative style for a broader audience, combining realism, allegory, and social critique. The alliterative revival played a critical role in shaping late medieval English literature, reflecting the diverse cultural and historical currents of the era. Courtly poetry. The alliterative movement in English poetry faded by the early 15th century, but a poetic tradition focusing on human sentiment, particularly love, became enduring. During Richard II's reign, English replaced Anglo-Norman as the dominant language, leading to increased royal patronage for vernacular writers. Geoffrey Chaucer played a crucial role in elevating English to a respected literary language. Chaucer and Gower. Geoffrey Chaucer, a Londoner, influenced English literature by writing in English rather than French. His early works, like The Book of the Dutch and The House of Fame, were inspired by French courtly love poetry. Chaucer's iambic pentameter in The Parliament of Fools and the Canterbury Tales showcased his mastery in storytelling and understanding of human nature. Poetry after Chaucer and Gower. In the 15th century, poets like Chaucer drew from French courtly love poetry, influencing English and Bourgeois circles. Scottish Maccaris like King James I and Robert Henryson emerged as true successors. Much of 15th century literature was religious, moral, and didactic, often anonymous and supported by local patrons. Writers like John Capgrave and Osborne Bognam thrived in East Anglia, while moving anonymous lyrics and carols on life's transience, death, and Christ's sufferings emerged. Religious prose. During the later Middle Age, English prose experienced significant developments in contemplative spirituality and theological discourse. Contemplative poets such as Walter Hilton's Scale of Perfection and Cloud of Unknowing shifted towards reflective expression of mystical experience. Women writers like Julian of Norwich and Margaret Kemp contributed unique perspectives to the mystical tradition. The translation of continental Latin texts into English played a crucial role in theological education and orthodoxy, shaping the trajectory of spiritual and literary expression in medieval England. Secular prose. In the later Middle Age, English prose expanded beyond religious texts to include secular compositions and translations. Notable work includes John of Trevisa's translations and Ranulph Hingden's Polychronicon and the Voyage and Travels of Sir John Mandeville. In the 15th century, English prose solidified as a respected medium for serious works, fostering national identity through historical chronicles, letters, and diverse stylistic approach. Sir Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur shaped the Arthurian literary tradition. Middle English drama. Middle English drama, largely lost due to performance scripts, showcase two prominent genres from the late 14th century: mystery plays or Corpus Christi cycles depicted biblically narratives, emphasizing Christ's life and passion. Morality plays, on the other hand, use allegorical characters to explore universal themes, with every man being a renowned example. The transition from medieval to Renaissance. The 15th century in medieval saw a shift from medieval to Renaissance literature, marked by works like Alexander Barclay's Pastoral Eclogus and Stephen Howe's The Pastime of Leisure English humanist writing focused on education and governance, with plays like the book named The Governor and the Schoolmaster, drama such as plays by Henry Medwall and Richard Rastall, and courtly lyric verse by Sir Thomas Wyatt and Henry Howard laid the foundations for future literature. The Renaissance period, 5050 to 1660, literature and the age. The Renaissance period from 1550 to 1660 is considered the pinnacle of English literature. It was characterized by a vibrant Renaissance spirit, a vibrant spirit of confidence and heroic achievements. The period was marked by societal upheavals and challenge, leading to literature of unmatched intensity and depth. This era is a defining epoch in English literary history. social conditions. During the Elizabethan and early Stuart periods, England experienced significant social and economic upheaval, with population doubling, price rising, and traditional social hierarchies dissolving. Railways hit historic lows, affecting merchants and laborers. Land enclosure for sheep farming strained relations with peasants. Political instability led to Charles I's loss of authority in the 1640s. Intellectual and religious revolution. During the Elizabethan and early Stuart periods, England experienced significant intellectual and religious change, leading to social unrest. The medieval worldview crumbled due to scientific discoveries, religious conflicts, and humanist ideas. The Stuart era saw technological advancements and astronomical discoveries, challenging established beliefs. Religious upheavals occurred as Elizabethan compromises faced criticism from reformers and Catholics. Intellectuals navigated personal faith amid uncertainties and political pressures. Calvinist beliefs shaped Jacobean tragedies. The rest for cultural development. During the Elizabethan and early Stuart periods, England experienced a literary renaissance influenced by humanism and classical learning. In English literature focused on dignity and ethical inquiry, while Italian literary forms like sonnets and epics influenced society. The Elizabethan settlement mass divisions exacerbated by scientific discoveries and religious disputes. Elizabethan literature, characterized by diversity and experimental spirit, reflected these complexities. The era's inability to navigate diverse perspectives amidst societal change is a testament to its cultural development. Elizabethan poetry and prose. In the late 1570s, English literature experienced a surge in poetry and prose excellence, led by Spenser and Sidney. This period, which lasted into the 1590s and 1600s, was influenced by increased education and confidence in English literary prose. The Stationers' Company and publications like Miscellany democratized access to literature, with Spenser showcasing his talents through print. Development of the English language. During the Elizabethan era, English literature underwent significant transformations, challenging the beliefs in its inferiority compared to classical language. Humanists like Thomas Wilson, Roger Ascham, and Sir John Cheke promoted clear vernacular prose, influencing education and translation. Religious turmoil led to landmark works like the Book of Common Prayer and Bible translations. Nationalistic sentiments fueled historical chronicles, while Toto's Miscellany popularized verse by Wyatt and Surrey. A mirror for magistrates influenced poetry and drama. Okay, the next material will be presented by Naufal Farras.
All right, thank you, Khayan, for the time. Next one is I would like to presenting about Restoration era. So the Restoration era literature refers to English literary works that produced during the historical period known as English Restoration, that is from 1660 to 1688. Next, please. First, literary reaction to the political climate. The term restoration literature is often taken to mean the literature of those who belonged or aspired to belong to the restored court of culture of Charles II reign. The mob of gentlemen who wrote this is, as Alexander Pope later put it, this identification was to allow Pope's contemporaries to look back on the Restoration as an age of excess and licentiousness, yet Puritans and Republicans had not disappeared with the Act of Uniformity and the Test Act. Those Protestants not conforming with the Church of England were excluded most public uh, offices. However, they still form an important body of opinion within the nation. They were also to make a distinctive contribution to the nation's intellectual life throughout the following century. Despite despite the return to the monarchy, Puritans and Republicans persisted, contributing significantly to intellectual life. Censorship stifled dissenting ideas, leading to anonymous political satire. Andrew Marvell exemplified this using the satire and prose to critique the monarchy and defend weak views. Next, please. Next is the defeated Republicans. The defeated Republicans documented their experience for posterity. Lucy Hutchinson, for example, wrote a memoir about her husband, Colonel Hutchinson, a parliamentary commander. Edmund Ludlow, a regicide, compiled his memoirs in exile, though they were edited before publication in 1988, 1998 to 1919. These works often underwent revision to align with contemporary political climates. George Fox, a Quaker leader, similarly revised his journal that published in 1694 to emphasize the pacifist principles. Was 1991, 1661, reflecting the text's role in shaping sect identity and continuity. John Milton, the leading prose controversialist before 1660, shifted his focus to poetry after his political hopes were dashed. In his retirement, he wrote his major works, Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, and Samson Antagonistic, exploring religious themes and the complexities of God's plans in human history. Next, please. Next, the writings of the nonconformists. John Bunyan's Grace Abounding, written during his imprisonment of nonconformity, recounts his conversion to inspire his fellow dissenters. They highlight the intense impact of the Bible on devout 17th century believer. While it follows the spiritual autobiography traditions, Bunyan's The Pilgrim Progress innovatively used allegory to depict Christian salvation, blending Calvinist theology with vivid, relatable experience. And despite of his lack of formal educations, Bunyan's work resonated widely, appealing to both the barely literate and affluent readers. Though it was not esteemed by literary elites, his narrative criticized gentlemen and worldly satisfaction vividly, depicting characters like Mr. Worldly Wiseman and various corrupt nobles. Richard Baxter, a persecuted or nonconformist cleric, was a prolific writer on religious matters. His Breviary, 1681, poignantly narrates his domestic life after his wife's death. His autobiography, Relic Baxterianae, in 1696, robustly defines Puritanism. Anti-Puritan sentiment post-Restoration found a voice in Samuel Butler's satirical Hudibras. This mock heroic poem, hugely popular and influential, critiques the previous Puritan rule but offers no clear support for the restored monarchy. Butler's rhyming tetramander broadly mock human values, reflecting his cynical views of politics and society. His daughter's satires and prose characters exhibit a similar disillusionment. Next, please. Next is writings of royals. Royalists also turn to biography and autobiography to document their experience of the defeat and restoration. Three notable examples of by women include Margaret Duchess of Newcastle's biography of her husband in 1667, and the memoir of Anne, Lady Fanshawe, and Lady Halkett, written privately in the late 1670s and published much later in 1820s, 29 and 1875, respectively. The most comprehensive account is Edward Hyde, Earl of Claremont, The History of Rebellion and Civil Wars in England, written in exile during the late 1640s and revised after his fall from royal favor in 1667. Clarendon's work offers an intimate and detailed partisan narrative of the period with exceptional characters portrayals. His autobiography, written in his final exiles, chronicles the genre transformation from 1630s to 1660s. By 1660, widespread support the Church of England had emerged, bolstered by persecution, and the re-established church, staunchly defending royal authority, focused on promoting moral conduct over theological controversies. Eminent preachers of the era included Robert Thorpe, Isaac Barrow, Edward Stillingfleet, and John Tilson. Despite the fear that preaching could incite rebellion, a plain and direct rhetoric style became popular, countering the obscure dialogues of sectarians. Gilbert Burke, in his 1694 funeral sermon of Tillotson, praised an archbishop for his clarity and simplicity. Published sermons continued to widely sold and influential throughout the late 17th and 18th centuries. Next, please. And here is the major works and the authors of the period. For example, by Thomas Pratt, History of Royal Society of London, that is published in 1667. And the next one is The Vanity of Dogmatizing in 1661 by Joseph Banfield. The next one is The Elephant on the Moon, uh, in circa 16 and 70 to 71 by Samuel Butler, and The Virtual Soul by Thomas Howell. Next, please. And here is the one of the outstanding figure of in the period, that is John Locke. He is a prominent philosopher of his time, recognized Newton and other natural philosophers in his influential work. An essay concerning human understanding in 1690, Locke viewed himself as an assistant scientist, aiming to clarify misunderstanding and simplify language. His essay, foundationally to empiricism, argued that all knowledge stems from sensory experience rather than innate ideas, with with the mind at birth being a blank slate or tabula rasa. The work explored the limits of human understanding and influenced 18th century thought. Locke also made significant contribution to political philosophy, particularly in his two treatises of government, advocating for the rights to resist unjust authority and revolution, shaping future political discourse.
So
And
for
beside that, there are also famous chronicles like Anthony A. Wood, John Aubrey, Josephel the First Marks of Halifax, Joseph Wilmot, the second Earl of Rochester, and also one is Gilbert Burnett itself. And that is all from me. In the next material of the 18th century will be presented by Abyan.
okay, thank you, Naufal. So for the next material, we'll go about the 8th century period of English literature. Next slide, please. Um, the 8th century, the expiry of the licensing act in 1695 halted state censorship of the press. During the next 20 years, there were to be 10 general elections. These two factors to combine to produce an enormous growth in the publications of political literature. Senior politicians, especially Robert Harris, saw the potential importance of the pamphleteer in winning the support of a wearing electorate, and a numberless hack writers produced copy for the presses. The affluence of political writing had headed the contemporary appetite for reading matter generally, and in the increasing sophistication of ironics and fictional maneuvers, assisted in preparing the way of the astonishing growth in popularity of narrative fictions. During the subsequent decades, it also helped fuel the other great new genre of the eccentric political journalists. After the Hooks review, the great innovations in this field came with the achievement of Richard Steele and Joseph Edison in the third, and then the Spectator in a familiar urban style, and they tackled a great range of topics from politics to fashion, from aesthetic to development of commerce. Next slide, please. One of the most prosperous countries in the world during this period, Great Britain built a strong royal navy to help protect a vast worldwide trading network for its manufacturers, merchants, shippers, and financiers. However, what has become known as the First British Empire collapsed with the loss of colonial holdings in North America following the American Revolutions. After the revolution of the American colonies through the British monarchy, Great Britain turned its imperial gaze away from the Americas and toward Asia, the South Pacific, and later America, marking the start of the period of Second Empire. Next slide, please. So the next material will be about the Romantic period, and will be explained by me. Next slide, please. So the nature of Romanticism as a term to cover the most distinctive writers who flourished in the last years of the 18th century and the first decades of the 19th. Romantic is indisputable, but also a little misleading. There was no soft-style romantic movement at the time, and the great writers of the period did not call themselves romantics. Not until August Wilhelm von Skel's final lectures of 1808 and 9 was a clear distinction established between the organic plastic qualities romantic art and the mechanical character of classicism. Many of the age's foremost writers thought that something new was happening in the world affairs. Nevertheless, William Blake's affirmation in 1793 that a new heaven is begun was matched a generation later by Percy Bishop Shelley. The world's great age begin anew. This will give the world another heart. Or another post wrote by John Skate, referring to Leigh Hunt and William Wordsworth. Fresh ideals came to the fore, in particular the ideal of freedoms. Luxuries in England was being extended to every range of human endeavor. As that ideal swept through Europe, it became natural to believe that the age tyrants might soon end. Next slide, please. And the next material is about the post-romantic and Victorian eras. Next slide, please.
Okay. I will explain about the post-romantic and Victorian era. This period of literature roughly coincides with the years that Queen Victoria ruled Great Britain and its empire. It's around 1837 until 1901. The 19th century is considered by some to be a golden age of English literature, especially in British novels. It was in the Victorian era that the novel became the leading literary genre in English. English writing from this era reflects the major transformation in most aspects of English life, from scientific, economic, and technological advance to change in class structure and the role of religion in society. Okay, next. Uh, uh, Now is in the early Victorian literature, or it's called the Age of the Novel. The early Victorian literature, known as the Age of Novel, was marked by a shift towards realism, social commentary, and a focus on human experiences. There are some authors in this era. First is novel authors. It's like Charles Dickens, William Makepeace Thackeray, Elizabeth Gaskell, and the Bronte sisters. And then is poetry authors. It's like Alfred Tennyson, Robert Browning, and like Chivi Robertson and George Bernard Shaw. Okay, next. Okay, now about the early Victorian verse, I will explain and give you some authors in this period. First is Alfred Tennyson. Tennyson's poetry blended lyricism, dramatic monologue, and English ideas. And next is Robert Browning's. His work focused on engaging reader in moral judgment through dramatic monologue. And then is Elizabeth Barrett Browning. She was renowned for her love poems and verse novel. Next is Matthew Arnold. His poetry was characterized by a mix of lyric grace and psychological depth. Analysis about the is rather high cloud. His life was cut short, left behind an original poem before his untimely death. Okay, next please. And now is about the nonfiction prose. Is also same eras in the early Victorian. Here there are three authors in this era. First is Carly. Carly. Its critics of utilitarianism and exploration of heroism in history inspired other writers. Next is Ruskin. His brought a romantic theory to art criticism and devolved into social and economic issues. And the third one, last one, is Newman. He known for his poetry and theological work, played a significant role in the Oxford movement and later penned his autobiographical work. Next, please. Next is about the late period in Victorian literature. Late Victorian literature witnessed a period of intellectual and artistic ferment characterized by the exploration of complex themes by prominent authors such as Charles Darwin, George Eliot, Anthony Trollope, and Thomas Hardy. Tom Hardy. This era also saw the emergence of new literary movement like aestheticism and decadence in poetry, with poets like Dante Gabriel Rossetti, William Morris, and Algernon Charles Swinburne challenging traditional boundaries. The 1890s marked a surge in relic, first influenced by Walter Pater and French practices, with poets like John Davidson, Arthur Symons, and Francis Thompson. Okay, next, please. Now is about the Victorian theater. The Victorian theater showcased a diverse range of dramatic work, including melodramas, comedies, and realist dramas. Oscar Wilde and Henrik Ibsen were influential during this period, they contributing to the rich tapestry of theatrical production. Okay, next. Now is the literary comedy in the Victorian period. It was characterized by a diverse range of humorous work, including comic novels, like verse, and humorous fiction. It's also Arcas Wilde and Henrik Ibsen were influential during this period. Okay, next. Next is 20th century will be explained by Farid Abdullah Mufid.
All right, thank you, Mr. Abdul. Okay, I will explain about 20th century. From period 1900 until 1945, the Edwardians. The 20th century began with a mix of optimism and anxiety, as prominent writers such as H.G. Wells, George Bernard Shaw, and Harry James delved into societal issues and the potential downfall of civilization. Poetic tradition show a resurgence, with authors like Thomas Hardy and Rudyard Kipling expressing pessimistic views about the future. Okay, next. Still same period, the Modernist Revolution. The Modernist Revolution in Anglo until American literature from 1908 to 1914 challenged literary conventions by embracing new ideas in anthropology, psychology, and philosophy. Features like Ezra Pound, T.H. Lawrence, and T.S. Eliot experimented but with form and language to capture the chaos of the post-World War I era. Celtic modernists such as William Butler Yeats and James Joyce delve into themes of nationalism and individual identity, with Joyce's innovative use of language and form in works like Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake, influencing other modernist writers like David Jones and Hugh McTavish. Next. The literature of World War I and interwar period. During World War I and the interwar period, traditionalist writers, particularly poets who experienced the war firsthand, responded in various ways in their literature. The prevailing sentiment among these writers, including Aldous Huxley, Virginia Woolf, and E.M. Forster, was one of cynicism and confusion, and as the grappled with the individualistic nature of modernity and the profound impact of the war on society. This woman challenged conventional narrative forms and delved into themes of female oppression and the quest for self-discovery and empowerment. Next. The literature of World War II, 1839 until 445. The literature of World War II was marked by a notable absence of new voices breaking through, as established writers continued to produce some of the most compelling fiction of the era. Poets such as Alun Lewis, Sidney Cales, and Kate Douglas emerged with notable potential, while T.S. Eliot's four quartets stood out as a masterpiece of wartime literature. Overall, the period was characterized by a blend of established literary figures and emerging talents, all seeking to capture the profound impact of the conflict on human experience. Next. Fiction. The post-1945 era in British literature witnessed a revival of religious themes in works by authors like Auden, Eliot, and Greene, who integrated Christian beliefs into their writing. Post-war fiction delved into topics such as original sin and social mobility, with novelists like Golding and Spark creating allegorical work. The 1980 and 90 saw a focus on post-colonial experiences, blending Eastern fables with Western influences by authors like Rushdie and Seth McEwan's novel in the 1990 reflected on the enduring impact of World War II. Next. Poetry. The late 20th century in British literature marked a significant shift towards more realistic and social conscious poetry. Poets such as Philip Larkin, Ted Hughes, and Seamus Heaney emerged as prominent figures during this period, exploring themes that delve into the complexities of mortality, the beauty of nature, and pressing social issues. Hughes, on the other hand, delved into the natural world with a raw and primal energy, infusing his poetry with a deep connection to the earth and its creators. Next. Drama. The late 20th century in British literature witnessed a shift towards more realistic and social conscious poetry and drama. Poets like Philip Larkin, Ted Hughes, and Seamus Heaney explored themes of mortality, nature, and social issues in their works. Playwrights such as John Osborne, Harold Pinter, and Tom Stoppard introduced new styles of drama, focusing on working class characters and existential themes. The period was characterized by diversity of voice and styles in both poetry and drama. Television drama in Britain also saw significant contribution from playwrights like next and 21st century. Next. 21st century. The dawn of the 20th century was characterized by a complex blend of optimism and anxiety as influential writers such as H. G. Wells, George Bernard Shaw, and Henry James delved into pressing social concern and contemplated the potential collapse of civilization. Furthermore, expatriate novelists like Henry James and Joseph Conrad made significant contribution to literature by capturing a prevailing sense of crisis and highlighting the inherent flaws of humanity in their literary works. Next. Okay. Okay, guys, that's all for me. Thank you for watching us, and goodbye.